So yeah, fabulous. So like I say, this is a Zoom meeting format. We've got a couple of polls that we'd love your participation in. One is just to find out a bit more about what you'd like to know more about. And then at the end of the session, we'll launch another one that will give us a bit of feedback on how you feel it's gone. We encourage you to actively participate, but you're not required to. And this is a safe space for minoritized people, and we won't tolerate any forms of abuse. We encourage challenging and constructive conversation, but people's lived experiences are not up for debate. If you have any serious concerns following this session, please go to wcia.org.uk and search for the whistleblowing policy, and you'll be able to find the process there. If you could flick back to the agenda, Kath, that would be great. So today's session is going to run as follows. Like I say, we've got housekeeping, and I'm going to put up a poll in a second. Then I'm going to introduce or ask the panelists to introduce themselves. We've then got a few questions that we're going to ask them, and then there is time for you to ask your questions. Then we'll do a brief summary and feedback, and the final poll before the session ends. So if I could launch the first poll. If you've already been in sessions in the summit this week and have completed this, you don't need to, or if you don't get a chance to do it now and you're in other sessions later on this week, you will be able to complete it then. So don't worry too much if you don't get a chance to. So yeah, if you could just let us know what themes you're interested in finding out more about. Okay, I'll just give it 30 more seconds for anybody who's still not managed to complete it, and then we'll end the poll.
Beth, I think you might be on mute.
I am, thank you. It's not like I've done this a lot this week. Sorry, everybody. Okay, if Stephanie, if I could ask you to introduce yourself, and we'll go around the other panelists. Yeah, if you could just say who you are and briefly what sustainability means to you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Stephanie Schlipper, and I work for an international development consultancy called MannionDaniels. And we manage two large funding mechanisms for FCDO, namely UK Aid Direct and UK Aid Match. Some of you might be aware of those. And I work around generally the transparency and operations of the funding mechanisms. What sustainability means to me, I guess it is the ability to continue something, whether that's a behavior or an activity or a benefit indefinitely, but especially without causing detriment or harm to other entities or systems.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephanie. Mitali, if I can come to you next.
Yes, hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Mitali, and I am a portfolio officer at the National Lottery Community Fund. So we are the largest funder of community activity in the UK, and we also have a small portion of our funding which goes to international projects, and I sit across international and UK funding. Joined the fund 3 years ago, having come from the global development sector, and my background is in violence against women and girls. So sustainability means to me, fairly similar to Stephanie actually, that the pursuit of any social justice work or justice work, whether it be with a focus on the environment, planet, people, the economy, is pursued in holistic and integrated ways, such that long-lasting positive change is delivered with as few trade-offs as possible. And it also means to me that change is pursued through an intersectional lens rather than a single justice lens, such that we are always centering the most marginalized people, the people on the harshest end of different oppressions, because I truly believe that when you center the most marginalized, it is the most effective approach to getting sustainable outcomes and sustainable social justice for all groups.
Fabulous, thank you. And Kat, if I can come to you to just introduce yourself and briefly say what sustainability means to you.
Hello, I'm Kat Miller and I'm the head of grants at WCVA. So my team manage all the non-EU grants that WCVA administer. So this is Landfill Tax Scheme, Comment Relief Community Fund, Volunteering in Wales grant, and in the past year it's been no mean feat in administering up to, I think we may have just passed the £20 million mark on emergency COVID grants. It's been a very busy year for us, and of course the small Wales for Africa grants. So yeah, well, easy for me then to be third to say what sustainability means for me. So obviously sustainability, in terms of sustainable development, should underpin everything that we fund. I think it's important to remember that whatever activity that we're funding through any of our grant schemes, and in particular the Wales for Africa grant scheme in relation to the sustainable development goals, everything makes a contribution towards a sustainable development, and it shouldn't be sort of passed off or dismissed how small contributions are. And as a funder, we're looking for contributions that in a sense do no harm but are acting in contribution to the sustainable development principles.
Thank you. Brilliant. Okay, so the first question, Stephanie, if I can ask you to answer first, and then I'll come to Mitali and Kat, if that's all right. What does sustainability mean, both in terms of types of sustainability, and also because there's obviously a lot of jargon in our sector, and it can mean different things to different funders. So yeah, to you, what does sustainability mean?
Yeah, I think sustainability is quite a complex thing to understand because it's understood by different people, within different contexts and in different ways. I think if we think about sustainable development, we've already sort of touched on this, about what it means to continue something without causing detriment or environmental impact. But I think it is such a difficult concept because it has to be contextualized within each setting. So you can't talk about something being sustainable without doing some sort of contextual analysis to be able to define it. So generally, I think it's fundamentally about people, power, and context in terms of defining sustainability. Particularly as the fund manager, we think about sustainability at the organizational level versus the project level. So project sustainability, I guess, with development in mind, is that a project can continue the benefits or the impacts, even beyond, say, the activities indefinitely, without sort of harming the local community. But it's not really about winning consecutive grants to keep those particular discrete funded projects going. But it's about handing over the continuous benefits, the ongoing activities or ownership to the community, to the local government, so that they have ownership over the benefits and impact in the longer term. Whereas organizational sustainability, I think it's more about governance, having the right human resources in place, having the right processes, policies, and financial stability to be able to deliver your work effectively, continuously, indefinitely. And I guess it's about the sustainable growth of an organization as well, which is almost an oxymoron, sustainable growth. But, it's about being able to grow in a way that is manageable, and that you can certainly, I guess, go beyond the grant giving model, but grow over time in a way that doesn't affect your ability to deliver programs effectively. Beyond like the project and organizational sustainability, if you're talking about types of sustainability, we think about in the FCDO funding realm, we talk about different levels and different categories of sustainability. So the different levels are sort of your impact, your direct impact on beneficiaries' lives and livelihoods. You also talk about influencing longer term policies and institutions, and then also building institutions and organizational capacity. So they're the different levels of sustainability that you can reflect upon in the context of projects. But then FCDO particularly talks about environmental, social, and economic sustainability. So yeah, I don't know if you want me to explain those a bit more, but maybe we'll hand over to someone else.
Yeah. Mitali, is there anything you want to add to what Stephanie's said in terms of what sustainability means in the work that you do?
Sure. I mean, I think Stephanie's done quite a comprehensive overview, and I would say it resonates quite a lot with how we work and how we understand sustainability. Would definitely kind of emphasize the first point that she made, that it means different things in different places, in different contexts, to different people. And so I really think it's about each organization contextualizing it for the own work that they are doing, but also understanding when you're applying for grants, doing a bit of research into how that funder might understand sustainability, and really trying to tailor your work so that it meets what the funder is asking for, but also stays authentic to your own understanding and definition of sustainability. I think the only thing that I would add in terms of organizational sustainability is that I agree that it's about governance, but it's also, I think, we're trying to expand our understanding of organizational sustainability to look more at things that are not often considered. So, for example, looking at different leadership models, looking at succession planning, looking at developing positive cultures of inclusivity, factoring in budgets for well-being and staff sustenance, which is often, a lot of organizations don't have the capacity for it. It's never funded, it's never supported. So I think certainly as a funder, we're trying to expand our understanding of organizational sustainability and look at how this relates to our traditional models of funding, which have nearly always focused on projects, which fundamentally isn't sustainable if you're not also looking at what the organization needs to sustain itself. So I certainly think there's, we're really trying to kind of advance our understanding around what organizational sustainability is, but also the necessity for funders to support that through more core funding and less, specific project, time-bound project-based funding.
Excellent, fabulous. Kat, is there anything you'd like to add to what Mitali and Stephanie have said?
Yeah, I mean, obviously at WCVA and with the Wales Africa Small Grants, we're operating specifically in a Wales context. So in Wales, we have the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, which obviously is, it's quite groundbreaking in the sense that it's the first legislation of its type, sustainable development wise, and it's quite a practical and accessible law. And though only public sector bodies are obligated by it, it's quite clear through the 7 wellbeing goals that the third sector does have a role to play in contributing to the scheme, to the goals of the Act. So one of the things that we look at WCVA with the Wales Africa Small Grants Scheme is what contributions that groups can make towards the goals of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And we've actually got, I can pop a link in the chat. We've got some fact sheets, which are quite useful generally for for groups to look at. So these fact sheets, there's one on each of the goals, and they help groups think about how they're acting in contribution to the goals. So obviously they're useful in terms of applying for Wales-based grants, but also useful in terms of, you know, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act is framed in sustainable development goals as well. So obviously it's massively interlinked. So I think that people will find that useful. And then in terms of, you know, sustainability in the sense of organisational sustainability, I think, you know, with the small grant scheme, we do recognise that, you know, some of the groups that we fund are very small constituted groups that are just, you know, solely volunteer led, and perhaps, you know, they've got a constitution, they've got a bank account, but they only want to become active sort of when they have a grant, and, you know, maybe they don't have any aspirations to build organisationally and, you know, scale up what they're doing. They're just, that, you know, that's what they're doing, small activities. So, you know, that is welcomed to the small grant scheme as well. So we, you know, we wouldn't overlook that at all. And then, yeah, in terms of sustainability for those groups that do want to sort of evolve into something bigger, you know, as a funder, we should be looking at, you know, at what we can do more in terms of building the capacity and, you know, resilience of organisations, so there is less reliance on grants. Very difficult when the specific aims of the grant scheme are really reliant on very specific set defined activities, you know, and carrying out, you know, very clear cut projects that have a beginning and an end. And obviously sustainability of impact is one aspect to it, but sustainability of the organisation is another thing. So yeah, very, very, lots we could say, but yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. That's a brilliant start. The next question we're moving on to, which Mitali, I'll ask you to take first, if that's all right, is in an application, what ways can an organisation demonstrate sustainable impact?
Thank you, Beth. There's so much. There's a lot. But certainly, and this has already been alluded to in various responses so far, is one thing that, you know, the main thing that we look for, and is in keeping with our strategy or our strategic framework, which is putting people in the lead, is really about the meaningful inclusion of the communities that you are working with. So meaningful inclusion in every step of the way, from inception through to design and delivery and evaluation, thinking through what's next. It's the right thing to do from a principled stance, but it's also sustainable because it ensures that there will be ongoing buy-in and ownership of the work long beyond the life of funding. And I think linked to that is demonstrating a recognition of how the individuals or communities that you're working with have changing needs and expectations. These are rarely static, and what there might be at the beginning often changes. So it's really showing an in-depth understanding and ability to adapt to changing needs and expectations of communities. I think another key thing that we look for around sustainability is strong partnerships with local in-country organisations, whether they be small organisations that are delivering alongside lead organisations, or whether it's for thought leaders or infrastructure organisations or local government, but really partnerships that are involve lots of different organisations that bring in country and local expertise and knowledge, but also ensure ongoing buy-in and a kind of integrated response. And then linked to that, I've kind of already said this, but kind of real efforts to engage and influence government, local authorities. So not just getting their buy-in and support of the work for the duration of the grant, but really engaging them to support whatever the work is beyond the life of the grant. And that can involve various different tactics. It doesn't have to be lobbying, it can be, you know, more collaborative work, or it can be lobbying, but it can be a range of tactics that just really invite the involvement and buy-in of local government. I think there's another thing which is about looking at your organization's position and presenting that within the wider ecosystem. So who are you sharing your learning with? Who are you collaborating with? How are you ensuring that you're not duplicating work that already exists, or not helicoptering into context that may be better understood by others, or there is something that you can bring, but there's also value add of others. So really situating yourself within that wider ecosystem. A really strong demonstrable ability to transition, flex, and be adaptable. Contexts are forever changing. There's often challenges and new opportunities. So really what we look for is that ability to adapt and flex, and comfort with adapting and being flexible and not sticking to a very rigid approach. And then I think linked to this is thinking about what's next in society for the communities that you're working with, for the organization that you are, what's on the horizon with digital and technological change, what's on the horizon with political change, with environmental change, and planning your work either in the life of the grant or whatever comes next to respond to what is on the horizon. And then my final point is, I've already made this, but I'll just stress this again, is really one thing that we look for around sustainability is working in the open. So sharing your learning, making your work shareable, writing blogs, holding workshops, and really putting your learning out there in an ongoing way, and developing what we're developing at the fund at the moment is, and certainly within our team, is this reflective practice. So kind of constant learning, constant sharing, constant adapting, rather than just learning and sharing and changing at the end of the life of a piece of work, and you've done, you know, an expansive piece of evaluation, but making that an everyday practice, because it allows you to kind of flex and change in real time. So those are kind of my key things that can be included, but I know that's really just, there's so much more that can be included. I'm sure others can add.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thanks, Mitali. Kat, can I come to you next, and what you look for in an application in terms of demonstrating sustainability?
Yeah, sure. Well, obviously, I think most of it's already been covered, but what I will say again is, you know, noting again that, you know, small groups deliver small, distinct activities, and, you know, the impact there might be that, you know, the ownership's passed on to the local community. You know, if it's equipment, it's enabled them to, you know, now be online and you know, have this equipment to, say, you know, improve the teaching provisions in classrooms, that sort of thing. Or it might be something with a longer term impact, like some of the health interventions where, you know, Welsh medical professionals go overseas and they're able to sort of provide skills and knowledge transfer with African medical professionals. Lots of different types of demonstrations of sustainable impact. I think one thing that's common across the third sector in general is not being very good at shouting about what we do and about the, you know, about the sustainable impact that activities having. So what we also like to see is through the small grant scheme, it's fair to say that a lot of the applicants, you know, come back time and time again. Quite a small pool of groups carrying out these types of activities in Wales. So making sure that, you know, if you've had a small grant of say about 5k, 5 to 10k, make sure you're shouting about the impact, make sure you're showing, you know, what's been achieved, be it through case studies. You know, we're not too interested in numbers. We do have numbers because Welsh Government like numbers. I'm sure Nicola will be smiling at that. But we want to hear the stories, and we want to see how these make long-lasting impacts on the people that you're working in partnership with in Africa, and also, of course, what benefits it's having to Wales, which is a hard thing to draw out, but it is a fundamental thing with the Wales Africa programme. But yeah, everything that Stephanie and Mitali said as well.
Yeah, excellent. And like you say, there's also, you know, there's not only the breadth of impact, but there's also depth of impact. And actually, you know, a small number of people whose lives have been changed significantly is just as important as a large number of people.
Well, absolutely. If you think about the, you know, like I said, with the medical professionals and knowledge exchange, you know, that project might have had a duration of a year, you know, and those medical professionals have, you know, learned skills, you know, picked up skills from Welsh medical professionals that they'll carry forward with them throughout their professional career. But the impact on those people that they've actually been able to help, you know, with, you know, cataract operations, etc., in that short space of time, you know, is lifelong. So lots of different types of things.
Thank you, Kat. Stephanie, is there anything you'd like to add to that in terms of what you look for?
Very comprehensive responses. So I'll be brief in my additions. I guess what we look for is that sustainability has been designed, what is at the center of the project design, you know, that an exit strategy has been clearly articulated and developed in your mind at the project design stage, because ultimately we're working to walk away, I think is something that Kath quoted once. You know, if we're successful development practitioners, there shouldn't be, we should be doing ourselves out of a job, basically. You know, we're doing discrete interventions that then can be taken forward without the need for us to be there. I think in terms of the project design, another thing is that you're actually, whatever problem you've identified that needs to be addressed, you're addressing the root cause of that problem and not, say, the symptoms of the problem. And things about analyzing potential resistance to sustainability. You know, so again, it's back to the contextual analysis. You know, what are there cultural things? Are there institutional things, policies that will prevent the project being able to be sustained after the project end date, which could include, you know, your analysis on what the capacity building needs are that you need to put in place in that discrete time frame to make sure that it can continue after that the benefits can continue after the project ends. And I guess it goes back to demonstrating your impact, evidencing the impact that you've had, which has already been sort of discussed, and having a clear plan on how you're going to measure and then evidence the success that your project is sustainable.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to the third question. Kat, if you don't mind going first on this one. So we talked a lot about your responsibilities to act sustainably as grantees, but what about as donors, as funders? What do you see your responsibilities towards sustainability being?
Well, you know, we should, you know, as funders, we need to, you know, I've alluded to it before, but about, you know, I don't think we should be funding the same thing time and time again. I think we should be encouraging grantees to build upon, you know, what's tried and tested. I think we have a responsibility to try and link up groups that are doing similar things, to try and sort of join them together and, you know, see what can be done in a more collective way with shared learning. And then, yeah, definitely one of Kath's little guidance notes was around sort of, you know, having an open communication with grant recipients. And I just want to make that clear today that, yeah, of course you have Hub Cymru Africa to offer sort of development and support when applying to grants, including, you know, the grant scheme that WCVA administers. But there are a team of people at WCVA as well that you can call up and speak to. So hopefully it'll be nice to build that ongoing relationship. And, you know, you absolutely contact us as a team of grant support officers that can help support you to build up project ideas and give you a steer as to whether you're, you know, whether it is something that, you know, the panel would consider funding, and similarly to advise you if, you know, it's something that absolutely wouldn't get funded. And then, yeah, just around flexibility, I think knowing, you know, not all organisations have, you know, professional bid writers or, you know, someone that's dedicated and opposed to fundraising, that sort of thing. So I think ensuring that there's a fairness in the assessment process when we're looking at applications, and, you know, once applications have been submitted, if we can have an open dialogue with people applying to get further information and fill in blanks. I think that is a good approach for a funder to take, and ensuring that we're funding the best projects, not just the people who are best at filling in the form. Yeah, I think that's it.
Fabulous, thanks, Kat. Stephanie, if I could come to you to answer the same question.
Yeah, sure. So as a fund manager, we have a responsibility to ensure that the projects that we oversee are effective, that they're successful, and that means having a sustainable impact, I suppose, on where they're working. So we try to facilitate, develop a culture of sustainability, sustainable thinking throughout the overall fund management and grant management cycle. So, you know, I think it's, yeah, Kat's touched on parts of this, but, you know, at the application stage, we're very clear on what we expect to hear from applicants about what a sustainable project looks like. You know, we give guidance on how to articulate sustainability in their applications. We, again, choose to shortlist or work with reviewers to shortlist projects that have addressed the sustainability section of the application very well, that have integrated sustainability across the application form, not just in the sustainability section. But those that are then unsuccessful, we provide feedback, you know, on how they can make sure that their projects are more sustainable next time round. So you're supporting the sector to understand sustainability a bit more and how they can improve that in their next round of applications. At due diligence, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're giving money to sustainable organizations that can effectively deliver work that won't potentially crumble in a couple of years' time if they lose some other funding from elsewhere. So it's really making sure that the money is in the best hands, so that, you know, the sustainable impacts can be achieved with the basis of a sustainable organization. But then during grant setup and into grant implementation, I think it's things that Kat has already talked about. So creating a learning environment, you know, sort of adaptability, flexibility, and openness with our grant holders, that they can come to us when there are any issues, challenges, changes, and we can problem solve together, you know, to put the project back on course, to make sure that it's the most relevant design for the change context, which will then ultimately achieve sustainability. So us, it's about sort of facilitating the environment or a culture of sustainability within the projects that we work with.
Fabulous, thank you. Mitali, if I come to you to add to anything that Kat and Stephanie have said.
Sure, thank you. Yes, so I mean, we are the largest funder in the UK, and over the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years, as we put in place our people in the lead strategy, we've been on a journey of moving from from quite a transactional approach to a much more relational approach within our funding. And as part of that, certainly within my directorate, I sit within the UK portfolio, and we are the kind of hub of the organisation that does a lot more of the kind of experimental work, funding innovation, taking more risks with larger kind of systematic change work, where some of our colleagues in their country directorates might do more of like the funding, the everyday kind of bread and butter service delivery work of organizations. So we're in I'm in a team that's quite fortunate to be at kind of driving our thinking around how we do work more sustainably. And one thing that we've done is try to move into more of a facilitative role and use the access to people, power, networks, knowledge that we have to share that much more with our grantees and with the wider sector. So increasingly we are holding lots of kind of workshops on strategic programs where we might bring like commissioners together with grant holders, with monitoring and evaluation and learning specialists, or those who have been evaluating programs, where there can be discussion, there can be building networks, building solidarity, opportunities for organizations to quite safely say to commissioners and funders what they need, And we're also, with our strategic programs, we are trying to develop much more of an approach where we take organizations through funding programs as a cohort rather than as individuals, where we support them to move through the program as a network. And we're already getting feedback from our most recent programs from the grantees that they're really enjoying this. They're having opportunities to build synergies with other organizations and starting to overcome some of that competition and kind of protectionism that organizations have due to the nature and conditions of traditional funding. We are moving, I work on a funding program called the Leaders with Lived Experience program, where we've facilitated a learning partner rather than an evaluation partner. So their role is much more, so they are a lived experience led organization. So we're kind of devolving power to do the evaluation to organizations from within the sectors that we're funding. But the approach of their work is much more working with the organizations to generate learning and reflections that benefit the sector and the organizations, rather than evaluating how good or bad a project is and that just feeding into the fund. And then another thing that we're doing is we are funding much more infrastructure and organizational resilience work. So we've had a number of new programs within my directorate that are funding leadership development, that are supporting organizations to develop narratives around what the future looks like, which will inform our wider civil society strategy. We have a whole digital fund, which is all about building the digital capabilities of organizations. So really moving beyond that kind of focus on service delivery and project to actually supporting the ecosystem and infrastructure around the sector, so that organizations can be much more sustainable.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for your answers all. I'm going to ask one final quick question, so if you could try and keep your answers short before we open it to the floor. Something that grantees sometimes struggle with is the log frame format. And have you got any advice to groups on how they continue to use the ideas within the log frame format once the project has ended, how that tool can be translated into a practical tool, I guess, that can be used by the community? And whoever wants to go first, feel free, because I know you've all gone first for a question each.
Just to add actually to the previous question, sorry, that's going backwards in time, isn't it? I think one thing I'm picking up now is it's quite nice that the small grants Wales Africa scheme can act as a bit of a catalyst and a bit of a stepping stone for moving up to some of the bigger schemes. So that's quite nice. I think that's quite a nice thing as in terms of, you know, responsible funders. We should be allowing new activity, allowing trial and error activity, you know, with a view to seeing what works before perhaps groups evolve into to apply to some of the bigger schemes. So I just wanted to add to that. And we don't ask for a log frame format with ours, so probably it's best answered by Stephanie and Mitali.
Thank you, Kat.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk a bit. I think everyone struggles with the log frame structure, and I guess it's about the concepts within the log frame, you know, and it's about community ownership and the participatory design process from the outset of the project. You know, we're having to fill out a log frame as a donor reporting tool, but really the concepts within that log frame should be understood by everyone on the project from the outset. You know, everyone should be understanding what activities are being developed, what activities will be run through the project, and ultimately what the expected change results of those activities are going to be. And that you don't need any sort of template to understand that certain activities result in certain outcomes, you know, and the log frame is basically, you know, those are your indicators, which is basically, you know, targets over time against a desired output or outcome. So yeah, I guess it's just about making sure, you know, you're designing the log frame hopefully with the community in mind from the outset. And, you know, if they fully understand what activities are expected to lead to what results, then hopefully that's in their mind for continuing without a log frame without having any template. You know, there's that sort of concept that yeah, the outcomes can be achieved over time.
Wonderful, excellent. Mitali, is there anything you'd like to add to Steph's answer?
Not much. I think, Stephanie, you've done such a good job. I've struggled with this question because of the very nature of log frames being quite a difficult tool and quite a top-down tool. But I think the way that Stephanie has outlined it being much more about the concepts and the definitions around and the understanding of like what an activity is and how it translates into an output and an outcome and impact is primarily understanding the difference between what an activity looks like and what is the change, what is the impact. And I totally agree with Stephanie that it's about community involvement and ownership and participation, and that will inevitably result in tools that don't necessarily mirror what a traditional log frame looks like. And that's fine, that's the way that it should be. But certainly I would agree that the work that needs to be done is building the skills and the conceptual clarity around what the different components of a log frame are, and then giving communities the scope to develop that into whatever tool or resource works for them and resonates with them. And then I think it's kind of the INGO's role to be a bit of a buffer between the funder and the community. As long as the funders are still demanding these log frames, you know, I think it's on INGOs to present it in a way that the funder receives it best, whilst also expecting whilst also putting pressure on funders to move away from needing log frames because they don't necessarily resonate with all organisations and communities. But yes, but I also understand that log frames are actually quite helpful for some organisations. You know, we've said to certain organisations we don't need log frames anymore, but they still present them because it's the way that they've always done it. So it really needs to be whatever works for your organisation and your community. So I'm not saying categorically they're problematic, but they can be. But I would just echo Stephanie's sentiments around really focusing on what's the activity, what's the change, focusing and on getting some measurement around change. It doesn't have to be in the most in the way that funders expect it. It doesn't have to be knowledge production through a Western way of doing it, but some kind of knowledge production and measurement so that communities can understand whether the work is having the intended impact, and if it's not, then be able to adapt and flex and change and take a different approach.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you so much, all. Okay, so now we've got 15 minutes or so for questions from the audience. Just whilst everybody's thinking about what they'd like to ask, Mubanga, are you there? We've got Mubanga from the Egmont Trust, who have a slightly different funding model to a lot of traditional donors. And I just wondered, Mubanga, if you could quickly just, if you're there, say a few words about how you operate as the Egmont Trust. No.
Thank you so much, Beth. I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this session. And of course, we as Egmont Trust believe in our partners knowing best. So work with small grassroots organizations in 6 countries in Southern region. That is Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Tanzania. So what we believe in is, of course, these grassroots actually
Oh, are you still there, Mubanga? Oh no, I think we might have lost him. Okay, well, hopefully he'll come back online in a minute. In the meantime, Paul Linderwood, I see you have your hand up. Do you want to come off mute? Oh, Mubanga, are you back? No. Yeah, go ahead, Paul. Ask your question, and then we'll hopefully get Mubanga back at some point.
Okay. One demonstration of an application person
One of the frustrations of an applicant or a receiver of donor funding is that you're constantly having to put a square peg into a round hole.
Particularly if you're sitting in your office in Africa, I remember
particularly if you're sitting in your office in Africa.
Which is the concept in which they're talking about it.
Which is the concept in which they're talking about it here.
That can be very disempowering.
That can be very disempowering.
I mean, I can remember myself.
I can remember having that experience myself.
Standing there and then finding that they've changed their criteria.
And finding a donor and then finding that they've changed their criteria.
And I have to go back to square one.
And then you have to go back to square one.
It's any way Muslim. I think Mitali had to give me the answer to this question, but I'd like to raise it again.
I think Mitali has been sort of answering this question, but I'd like to raise it again.
If it would involve the whole same in development funding criteria.
Is there any way we can use the whole chain when developing funding criteria?
Rather than
just a few people in African power. Oh, in an Eiffel Tower, sorry.
It's
just that that's the way it can come over.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paul, for that question. Panel, who would like to take Paul's question? Okay.
I think it's generally a difficult one as being on the donor side, and well, actually we're not even a donor, you know, where we're extending the program for FCDO, and FCDO have an array of criteria that they need to be met from a reputational risk perspective, from a delivery risk perspective, from an operational risk perspective, and you know, I think it's really challenging to I think, yeah, bridge that divide between the donor, the people who do have the money, and then the projects. And I think what we try to do is review our application questions and review criteria after each round. You know, we've started having surveys with applicants, even if they're unsuccessful, you know, to understand, you know, how they found the process, what the feedback is, so that we can keep doing different iterations of the application form of the review criteria, and trying to, I guess, balance between, you know, asking for simple information, but also getting the level of information that we need to actually make an assessment as to whether this is, you know, a viable project, a well-designed project, and also balancing, you know, our clients' needs to an extent, or our client standards, FCDO. So yeah, it's a really tricky one, but I guess it's maybe one way is continually iterative process and consultation with the people who are applying to make sure that your project questions make sense, that they're relevant, and that the scoring criteria, you know, also factors in what is relevant, what is important. That's my attempt at answering such a question.
Thank you, Stephanie. Does anybody have, or panel, is there anything else you'd like to add to that? If not, go ahead, Mitali.
Would somebody just clarify the question for me? Because I didn't catch the end of it, and so I listened to Stephanie's response to make sure I got it right, but I'm not sure I did. So I'm sure there's something I could say, but I was just wondering, Beth or Kath, if you can just quickly summarize the question.
It's not the separation between the recipient and the donor.
Basically, it's a separation between the recipient and the donor.
And how do we bridge that gap?
And how do we bridge that gap?
I think something you answered it, but other things as a general issue.
I think in some degree you did answer it, but I just want to address it as a general issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll just add, certainly within, it is something that we're also looking at. We are looking at how we make applications more accessible. We've recently started accepting video applications, which is quite new for us, and we're developing a lot of learning around how to support applicants to put in a strong video application. So this is quite new for us and for our applicants. So we're hoping that is something that is well received and taken up, that can take away from the onerous kind of long form filling in. We've also certainly with our new Leaders with Lived Experience program, we have just 3 questions, and it's very light touch. And quite a light touch assessment process. I think one thing that we need to do more of, which perhaps MannionDaniels seem to be doing a bit better than us, is actually getting more feedback from applicants, both successful and unsuccessful, around how they found the process, but also doing more to reach out to organisations that are not even applying to us at all. There's so many organisations that are not even on our radar because that gap is so, that chasm is so big, or some organisations have applied to us and had such a terrible experience that they won't come back. And so we're really looking to see how can we address this, doing much more outreach, and trying to make the system as streamlined and simple as possible.
Wonderful, thank you, Mitali. Mubanga, are you back with us? Sorry, we lost you halfway through what you were saying.
Hello, yes, I'm here. Could you please repeat the question?
So we just wanted you to tell us a bit more about the model that the Egmont Trust have in terms of funding directly to organisations in Africa. Yeah, if you could just explain a bit how that shapes what you look for in terms of sustainability.
All right, so what we do is we have an online expression of interest form that our partners do fill in on our website. And once they do that, we actually go out now to, we review those applications, just a brief form about who the partners are, the project concept they have, the results that they wish to achieve. And then we go down to these organizations to visit them physically to do the due diligence. And from there, if they are successful, then we invite them to submit a proposal, which is reviewed, and then feedback is given. If at all they meet our selection criteria, then we actually do admit them to a small grant of up to $20,000 per annum. So that is basically the selection criteria that we have. And for information, I'm actually based in Zambia, so we do move around to visit these partners and solicit for these grassroots organizations in all these 6 countries that operate.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions? I'm just going to scroll across the page to check if anyone's got their hand up. Was there anything else anybody wanted to ask?
There's a question in the chat.
Oh, okay. I can't actually see the chat. Are you okay to read it?
Oh, okay. Sorry, yeah, I can read that out then. So the model for development is changing. And in order to ensure we are able to tackle global issues in partnership, more power needs to be ceded to partners. What are the funders planning in that respect?
Excellent.
From an FCDO perspective, I know that they're starting to prioritize the localization agenda, particularly even our fund, UK Direct, while most of you might be aware of the Small Charities Challenge Fund, the higher level of that is the Community Partnership and Impact Grants. And over time, we've opened up the eligibility to be more Southern-based. So originally it was all UK-based. You had to be a UK-based charity to apply. So then they're always having to work with partners and whatnot. But we've worked with FCDO to change the eligibility so that it's open for Southern-based organizations to apply directly, which means that the funding goes directly. So I think it is in FCDO's mind about trying to shift things away, but I guess you do have to balance with also supporting UK charities to maybe work more effectively and responsibly with partners as well, providing guidance on how they potentially work more in partnership rather than a top-down model with their downstream partners. So designing everything from the outset, reporting everything, not the reporting is done, from the UK, but the people that the project team on the ground are involved in every step of the project management, design. So it's about more fair and equal partnerships and promoting that within the context of our fund as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephanie. Is there any further comment on that question, or we've probably got time for one more if anybody's got anything. If not, we will go to the poll. No? Okay, well, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, Stephanie, Mitali and Kat. We really appreciate it. And thank you everybody else for attending. I'm just going to launch the final poll just to get a little bit of feedback on how everybody feels like today's gone. And hopefully we will see some of you at our other sessions throughout the rest of the week. But yes, thank you. Big thank you to our panelists for a really interesting conversation. And I'm also going to post in the chat a link to our feedback survey if you wanted to give fuller responses in terms of your feedback. The polls capture some stuff, but yeah, if you felt the need to fill in another form, we've got a feedback form that you can give more qualitative answers to. So yeah, so thank you very much for your time, everybody, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.